Oh,
It says we're still at, there we go.
and welcome along. Hi, this is Kathy Frey. Hi, this is Kathy Frey, and welcome to this and our maternity natural health webinar. And Mandy is an expert in holding spaces and creating mother circles, which other hospices, honestly, and without fear of judgment. And Mandy is going to explain a little bit more that she is a call guide program. You know, because bringing women together always gone on for thousands of years, but just so little of it in modern times, and women need those connections. But we've got a bit of internet issue going on, smoother with the connection.
You're really breaking up, Kathy, but I think I got the gist of that. Um, which I think you were saying that women gathering in circles is really very old and has been going on for centuries. And women have traditionally really supported each other in that old village community, the family network, where it would be the wise women of the community that would support the pregnant ladies and the mums to be, and that we are losing that, or in many cases we've already lost that in our society, which means that a huge level of support for mums to be and mothers has disappeared or is disappearing, particularly from the more Western cultures. I think I'm just going to wing it and just speak a little bit about Mother Circle. So forgive me, I'm just going to message Kathy, because we did say if the internet didn't work, I think Kathy's on a satellite connection, which is a bit tricky sometimes. I'm on Wi-Fi, so it's okay. So I'm just going to message Kathy and say effectively that I'm going to wing it. So full transparency. Here goes. Thank you. So I am Mandy Rees, and I'm based in Birmingham in the UK. It's currently 10 o'clock in the evening here. And I would love to share with you my experiences in holding space for mums and mums to be, and how vital that is to their emotional well-being, the way they prepare for birth, the way they navigate pregnancy, and the way that they are supported and held in that postnatal period. By way of background, when I first became a mum, I was a real estate lawyer, so practicing as a lawyer. That was 21 years ago, nearly. My eldest daughter is 21 next week. And when I became a mum, I wasn't prepared. I didn't have a network of women around me. I didn't have many female friendships, and neither did I have a close relationship with my own mum or my sister. And I was very, very lonely when I became a mum. And I feel, or I know actually, that that was the one of the main reasons that I ended up suffering with very severe postnatal depression. And becoming a mom was a very difficult time for me, and not at all what I expected. So to cut a long story short, I retrained, I created a business, and now I work supporting mums through their pregnancy and into that initial postnatal period within circle spaces, so group settings, up until their babies are around 1 year of age. And I do one-to-one support and mentoring of mums as well. But as Kathy was alluded to, as you might have heard at the beginning, For centuries, since time began, women gathered in groups within their community, within their villages to support each other. Traditionally, it would have been the wise women, the elders that in many cases were leaders of their communities. There were matriarchal societies, but certainly they would have been the midwives, often the doctors, but the first port of call for another woman if she needed support, not just during her pregnancy or when she became a new mum, but generally, we'd have been welcomed in through our cycles. Our first menstruation period would have been celebrated, would have been acknowledged by all the women in the tribe. You may have come across the red tent. We would have gone and gathered together and really supported each other. And that's not only where we got support, but we really shared our wisdom and we shared our knowledge, and we were able to pass things down through our lineage about how we could look after ourselves in pregnancy, how we could stay safe during birthing, how to breastfeed, how to feed your baby, that know that it's normal to feel down and low. And we would have been really nurtured and nourished by those other women. And through various reasons, geography, we don't live near our families, the way we work outside of the home as well as in the home during our pregnancies has changed that. But also, I feel, and I felt it myself, and I hear it from the mums I support all the time, society places huge pressure on us in pregnancy to carry on with everything else we're doing and almost forget that we're pregnant and just fit that around everything else. And then when we become mums, the expectations placed on us by society and those that we place on ourselves are absolutely huge. And we're almost set up to fail because there's no way that we can live up to these unrealistic expectations. And without a sounding board to know where you're sitting and what other mums are experiencing, it can be a very lonely and a very scary place. That means that what I do is I hold spaces for mums to be and mums within a circle. So these are quite small groups of around 10 to 12 women in pregnancy, and when they've had their babies join us as well. And we share experiences of what's been going on in our lives and what being pregnant is really like and what motherhood is really like. And do these spaces make a difference? They really, really do. I did a list just before I came on to this webinar of the things that we talked about in our pregnancy group over the last 2 weeks. And just to give you some idea of the kind of things we talk about, we've spoken about the language used in birth, how there's an expectation on us to just do what our midwife or consultant recommends, our body image, our self-confidence, navigating leaving work, how to navigate unsupportive employers, sickness throughout your pregnancy sometimes, pelvic girdle pain, what your birth support partner can do to support you in birth, what they can do to support you postnatally, expectations of family when it comes to visiting or actually being there at the time of your baby's birth, setting boundaries around what you want to do in your pregnancy and what you want to do postnatally, letting go of expectations, really prioritizing your own well-being, not just in your pregnancy, but during that postnatal period. So perhaps a postnatal plan, navigating partners who don't understand how you're feeling, the ups and downs of your hormones and all of your emotions, worrying that if you already have children, how are you going to love the new baby as much as you love them? And how are you going to find time for your existing children? So there's a huge array of topics that we cover. And I used to do my classes prioritizing on yoga. So I trained as a yoga teacher. And I soon realized, and I felt instinctively from my own needs, that it was the sharing space that was so more important. My pregnancy group runs for 2 hours. And at least an hour and a quarter of that is simply talking and sharing. Then it's a mix of some yoga, breathing exercises and relaxation. But the majority of it has been taken up by this talking space. And I also think that as women, we're not used to being listened to. And as a human species, we're not very good at listening. I don't know whether you've experienced this yourself, but you're trying to tell someone how you're feeling and what's going on, and they're not hearing you. because they're distracted, or they're already thinking about what they're going to say next, or they're trying to give you a solution when you don't want a solution. You simply want to be seen and heard. And that's what a circle gives mums to be and mums. They actually feel that they are important and what they're saying is important. So it really validates their experience. It reassures them. And often it gives them the confidence to make a different decision or to challenge a decision. So talking specifically about support during pregnancy, I find here in the UK that our maternal services are under a huge amount of pressure, and they are unfortunately failing many families in many cases. And people like me and possibly you are having to step into that void and be that support network, that emotional support that women really need, because midwives are too busy. The NHS just simply doesn't have the resources here in the UK to provide that emotional support. And I hear again and again from my mums to be that their midwife is just too busy, or she's not really listening, or unfortunately quite often she's very abrupt, she's very rude, and she's very, very dismissive. And it does seem to be getting worse. And I'm not critical of our midwifery at all, because it's a hard, hard job and it's exhausting. It's not paid well enough. And you do it for the love of the job, not because you want to earn loads of money. But our midwives are not able to give all the women that they're supporting the time that those women really, really need. And that's impacting on birth choices and birth outcomes. So I really believe that by providing spaces for mums to be to talk around what's going on their pregnancy, to hear what other mums to be are doing, to hear how other women are feeling, to understand the options around, say, a VBAC or a home birth or gestational diabetes on its own doesn't mean you have to be induced. All those things are really, really important. And we are creating a support network outside of what the NHS here in the UK or wherever you're based may be able to provide. So we're really empowering women in those spaces, and we're giving them a space just to simply talk through their birth choices, to bounce ideas off people, to ask for shared experiences, to simply feel more comfortable that what they're going through isn't unusual and that they're not on their own. For example, it's okay to not enjoy being pregnant at all, or not to enjoy lots of it, and feeling absolutely dead on your feet is really normal. But unless you're with other women and they're sharing those experiences, you simply won't know that. So circle spaces are really important for continuing the community, for sharing our wisdom, for passing what we can down through other women, and also giving them a space to talk about choices, but also be really heard and properly listened to in a way that they're probably not going to be receiving from their healthcare provider. I would like to clarify that a circle space isn't where you're the holder of the circle, you're trying to fix every problem every mum has, because most of us are fed up with people throwing unhelpful suggestions at us. I phrase my circle on the basis that if I feel like a mum is asking for help, I ask her, would suggestions be helpful right now? Are you asking for input or simply us to share our experiences with you? So I always clarify that within the circle space, because I don't want mums to come away feeling really overwhelmed and just having more information thrown at them. But I have noticed that particularly during pregnancy, women really want to have as much knowledge as they can that relates to them, which feels very valid and relevant, rather than getting lost in a Google hole, which can be really quite frightening if you end up going down the wrong hole. I do have a long list where I can signpost my mums to a really lovely network of pre and postnatal specialists near where I live in Birmingham in the UK that I can refer my mums to, and some really good online resources that I feel really comfortable at referring my mums to. Because again, I feel that we can be very overwhelmed by Google. Google can effectively Google us out of our instincts, and therefore we stop learning to trust our bodies, trust our instincts, and that makes pregnancy, birth, and motherhood really, really overwhelming and much more difficult to navigate. You know, another topic we talk about a lot is finding space to listen to your body. You know, how do you feel in birth? Can you slow things down? When your baby's here, can you create the space to, again, listen to your instincts and be led by your baby rather than what your mum or your best friend might be saying? So circles just make such a huge difference to the pregnancy, birth, and postnatal experience. I know from the mums that I've worked with that they have made not necessarily different choices around their baby's birth, but when they are in the birthing situation, they've had the confidence to not be persuaded down a route that didn't feel entirely comfortable for them and might not have been the best one for them and their baby. Or when things have got more difficult or complications have arisen, they've had the confidence from the discussions we've had or the signposting that I've done to make a decision in that moment that feels right for them, and they have really advocated for themselves and their baby. And it makes me really sad that there are many women out there who aren't able to access this additional support, and they're being pushed down the induction route, having sweeps, having examinations, lots and lots of intervention that they really didn't want. And when I work with women who have experienced trauma during their baby's birth, it's really the main reason they feel so unheard and traumatized is because nobody was listening to them properly, and people weren't really asking what it was they needed and how they felt in that birthing space. But if they come to a group such as a circle or antenatal support, which I know some of the ladies that are members of this group do, they really get empowered, and we build each other's confidence by sitting together. Last night we were talking about VBACs. I've got 3 ladies in my pregnancy group at the moment who are hoping to have a VBAC this time round, and 2 of them had been referred to our local VBAC clinic, but one of them hadn't. And if she hadn't been within our circle, she wouldn't have known that that was a thing that existed, and it was a service that was available to her, but she just simply hadn't been invited into it, or it hadn't been mentioned to her by her midwife. So that sharing knowledge of local resources, the fact that, for example, now you can actually go and look at the birthing centre in one of our hospitals that you haven't been able to do since COVID, again, that can make a huge difference to someone's birth experience or how they're preparing for their baby's birth. So perhaps if you're working in antenatal services, or you're teaching yoga, or you're a hypnobirthing practitioner, think about creating a space within your groups that is a circle element that asks very open questions, and where you're really actively listening to what's being said, what's being shared, without trying to offer lots and lots of solutions and answers, and without trying to assume that you know what that mum's worry is. And I don't know whether this would be helpful, but one of the great things about holding space is allowing there to be lots of silences, which lots of people find quite difficult because we're not used to sitting in silence. We're taught as children that we should always respond, and we should always be polite, and we should always say something. But I've noticed that it's in those moments of quiet when brains keep whirring, cogs are turning, and sometimes a mum who might not have said anything for a while will speak into the silence because she's had the opportunity to talk. And by setting the circle in a beautiful way, it does feel really safe, and there's a lovely bond of trust that's created amongst everybody, and everyone shares from a real depth of their heart and their soul. And it's in the quiet bits that you create that somebody will say something that's often very, very powerful, but reveals really how they're feeling about something. Words I hear quite often are, I didn't expect to share this with you. Oh gosh, I didn't realize actually that it was bothering me this much, but it really is. Oh yeah, now I can relate that back. This is what my midwife said to me, and actually it really upset me, or it was unhelpful, and I'm really worried because this is what my mum said to me a few weeks ago, and it's been on my mind all the time, and it's stopping me sleeping, and it is causing me some anxiety. So a lot of proper, deep, soulful sharing come out in these circle spaces, which make a huge difference to somebody if you're simply able to share it and just get it off your chest and get it out there. And everyone else will support that woman. Again, not throwing loads of suggestions at her, but just nodding their head. If I were to look around my circle, sometimes there's just lots of people nodding their heads, going, just that understanding and that empathy makes a huge difference to how you feel when you're preparing for the birth of your baby. And the beautiful thing is then that these ladies have a group of women that are having babies, within a similar period to them, because I have lots of different stages of pregnancy in my group, but you have a group of women that can support you in that postnatal period as well. I never thought I would be lonely as a new mum, but I don't think I'd ever been so lonely in my life as when I had Grace, and I didn't have that network of mum friends with me. So I really do create a community by having WhatsApp groups. We have meetups. When I'm on holiday and I don't do my pregnancy group, often the ladies all meet up and go out for a pizza, which is really lovely to see. They share their photographs with me. When I run my mother circle for mums and babies, often the mums will go up to a coffee shop close to where I do my circles, and they'll all meet and have lunch together. So it's really all about creating a community as well. And my big overarching aim in all of this is to really show women how beautiful and amazing other women are. And when you can allow yourself to open up to other women and be vulnerable, which, let's face it, is quite scary for lots of us. I find being vulnerable and asking for help quite difficult. I'm practicing it and I'm trying really hard, but it can be very difficult, particularly if you have a very busy job and you're working all the time and you're very self-sufficient and you don't like asking for help and you find it difficult. Just knowing that you have other women around you who are also asking for help makes it feel okay. So that's another really important element of the circle, is just learning from other women and showing our babies and then our children when they get bigger how important it is. Not just women supporting women, but men supporting men, everyone supporting each other, trying to break down those barriers, that competitiveness that lots of people can feel against each other, particularly female on female. I have 2 daughters, so I remember my experience as a teenage girl, and their experience as a teenage girl of other girls hasn't been particularly supportive or kind. So I have a kind of overarching ethos with my circles that it shows women how absolutely amazing other women are and how they can transform your experience in pregnancy and motherhood, and how leaning back into that support is incredibly important and can really transform what is quite a tricky and scary time in our lives for many of us. The uncertainty of birth can cause a lot of anxiety, but knowing that other women who are going through it with you feel the same way as you, and they're not judging you, and they just want you to have the best possible birth experience that you and your baby can have, is lovely, because it might be one of the first times that a woman has really had that support from another woman. And we really need that as mums. We really need to be coming together, and we really need to be making a difference, and we really need to be shifting those dynamics of how people treat each other. And again, I know this might sound like a pipe dream, but I do believe that we can do that by bringing groups of mums to be and mums together, and just setting that space within a circle, almost setting those guidelines that they take back into their mothering experience, pass on to their children. Maybe they even take it into their workplace and try to change the culture there. So circles are really, really important for validation, empowerment, changing the world, quite frankly, in the way we treat each other, filling that gap in maternity services. Certainly here in the UK, you might feel that wherever you're based. And also from a personal perspective, it is so fulfilling and rewarding for me And the women that I've worked with for around about 10 years now have really taught me such a lot about myself, but also how I used to view women, lots of issues that I was carrying with me, lots of judgments that I used to make about people. And it's really taught me how to be friends with other women and how to be vulnerable and how to ask for help and to know that that's okay, which in turn has made me a much better mum. The messages and hopefully the teachings that I pass on to my girls are very different to the ones that they would have been if I hadn't done this work and I hadn't spent thousands of hours sitting with other women, just simply reflecting on how amazing they are when they all come together and love each other and look after each other.
I've got.
So I hope it's okay.
Can you
Kathy,
hear
can you
me all
got
right?
me? Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, that's great. Look, it's just been lovely listening to you. And it's almost like this sort of warm shower of warm fuzzy that is, I'm just so on the same page with you. And that whole journey of, so often I think when women are pregnant these days with their first, it's kind of the first time in their lives that their female side has really become this dominant aspect of them. And because before then it was almost like a striving of equality and things along the way, but suddenly you're faced with the fact that your breasts are growing and doing these crazy things and aching like heck, and your belly's growing, and your womanness is just completely dominating, which hasn't been the case before. And it can be quite confrontational. And I think that we can be so kind of based around our partner, which is great. They're all part of that whole, it took two of you to make a baby. And it's often, do you find that it's those second time round mums that particularly have kind of almost learnt the lesson that we need naturally to be around other women. And so often on this platform, the 99% of the time, the person who is guest speaking, it is that the topic that has become their passion has come from the rising of the phoenix, that they went through this, and this, and that created that passion in them to do this. And I certainly have found a frustration, I guess, that sometimes it's hard to have the primates receptive to some of the ideas of, look, this is a really good thing to be doing, and where they might be going, look, I'm just too busy with that with work, look, I'm just trying to, and it's not the priority. And then it's afterwards when they go through that journey that becomes incredibly lonely, and then they may form a bond of friendship with another woman, and another one joins them, and then they realize, and it's something that's almost, evolves, that girl friendships become so incredibly more valuable than you'd ever experienced before, and than you ever anticipated it would become. How do you find the receptivity of primates, particularly, to want to participate? And do you sort of feel like you're pushing things uphill a little bit sometimes, and or I think the other health professionals here could be quite interested to know how you're reaching out to your woman and getting that buy-in, I guess.
It's in pregnancy, it's not so difficult because you've got more time in pregnancy, particularly if you're a first time mum, because you haven't got other children, and there is this well, when I'm pregnant, I'm going to do a bit of relaxation. I want to do some yoga. I want to do hypnobirthing. There's all these tick boxes, isn't there, to do. So I don't find it so hard in pregnancy. And I think once a lady's come to my pregnancy group and she realizes how valuable the circle element is, it's an easy win for me to then say, well, it's same as this, but you bring your baby along and we talk about motherhood rather than pregnancy. So that works incredibly well, but it is more of an uphill battle postnatally, because women will spend money on their baby, but they won't invest in themselves. So they'll go to baby, and there's nothing wrong with these groups. They'll go to baby sensory, baby signing, baby massage, all of these things that are very baby focused. But going back to your point, the second or third time mums, they have learned their lesson from first time round, where they just neglected themselves completely and were so depleted or very lonely, which was my experience, that when they come to have other children, they are much higher up their list, and they are, I'm coming because I know I need this. And I think you kind of, you still feel guilty, but you just get over the guilt a bit more quickly with subsequent children, because you realize that you've just got to, otherwise you're just going to spend your whole life depleted and feeling rubbish about everything. So it is more of an uphill battle, because a lot of people are like, well, how am I going to benefit from just talking to other mums? But if you've been through it on your own, you realize how valuable it is. But also, I think the bigger issue here is that often women are not nice to other women, and there is a fear of hanging around with a group of women because you've been in cliques, you've had unpleasant experiences at school or perhaps work, you've been excluded by girls, women. So, and that was my experience. I do think there is a lot of fear around, are these women going to be nice? Is Mandy going to be nice? I don't know her. How am I going to feel about it? So I think a
really
circle.
Interesting point that you bring up, and that's not a topic that's really gets mentioned very much. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because there can be a lot of fear around when you haven't had great experiences of other women being nice. Yeah, really, really, especially perhaps these days, where there's just such a rampant ability to say really awful things on the internet to each other, and it's just people will type things that they would never say in person, don't they?
Yeah.
And so we are dealing with probably some scar tissue from that's really sad, but I can see that's a really big point. So it sounds like, so people, the women, with your groups, it's kind of like you're like a little part of their tick list at the beginning. I need to find out about hypnobirthing. I need to sort of, you're just sort of part of their tick list, that they feel like these are things they should do. And then once they're there and they're part of it, they realize a bigger picture of how incredibly valuable it is. I mean, and our kids are similar age. Ours are all in their 20s, and it seems, we were very much that generation, I guess, where everybody just went to the in-person antenatal classes, and you did form some friendships over those periods, and quite often, those 6 Thursday nights in a row or whatever, and that would often evolve into a coffee group that could go on. In fact, I mean, we're still very good friends with quite a hardcore of our original coffee group, or our original antenatal classes. We're still very good friends with a bunch of them, and and the kids have all grown up together, and that's been amazing, only wonderful aspect of it as well, that all our kids have known each other all their lives, and the kids even in their 20s are still getting together probably every second or third Friday they'll meet up. And, so, I mean, how valuable was that? And we certainly wouldn't have predicted it when you sat down at that very first,
Hmm.
classroom with a whole lot of strangers.
Yeah.
So do you sort of see that? But I think internet and then COVID has really impacted how couples are seeking prenatal education. And there's less in-person stuff going on. So how are you finding that? Is it almost like it's replacing the old coffee group, the sort of established from prenatal in-person classes? And it's
I'm finding that people want to do in person as much as they possibly can. Yeah, certainly here in the UK, it's all the services around here now are back in person, and that's what mums really want. But interesting, obviously, when we were locked down, I moved everything to Zoom. So everything happened by Zoom, and all of my groups have a WhatsApp group that goes with them. And the mums that were with me during lockdown, obviously, some I did meet in person before we locked down, but lots I've never met. And I ended up having a lady from Amsterdam, another lady in Turkey that just found me and they joined my group because they could, because they were expats of the UK.
right.
And I have to say the WhatsApp community and the community of the mums at that time is probably one of the strongest group of mums I've ever had in the 10 years I've been doing this,
Wow,
even though
isn't
most,
that interesting?
yeah, and that WhatsApp group,
Even
because I'm
though
still
they
in,
didn't meet in person, it's one of your strongest groups.
yeah, and I'm in the WhatsApp group still for that one, and it's still now their children are at preschool and they're starting to have other babies, and that is still an active WhatsApp group. Not every day, but every week probably there'll be a question or a comment or something, and everyone's in there helping, checking in on people. So the community that we created during that time is absolutely amazing, and I really genuinely feel that they will be friends for life in that virtual sphere. Some have met now because lots of them were based in Birmingham, and Vicky, the lady who lives in Amsterdam, when she has come over to the UK, she's met up with some of the people. So we were still able to create an amazingly supportive community, even though we couldn't meet in person. So I think, so, and I know because I ran all my circles then, a virtual circle can create as much of a strong community and support as an in-person one. But I'm definitely finding people want to sit with other people. They want to have that physical contact if they can. But you can create an amazingly powerful community just by being on Zoom or Teams or whatever.
That's fantastic. It's so interesting that you've got that comparison as well. Yeah. Um, it is there any particular advice that you'd want to pass on to birth practitioners that would be watching this? And we have a lot that, so we have a few that will be watching live, and then we have a lot that are watching later on. So any particular guidance or suggestions or recommendations that from your experience that you would suggest to the birth practitioners that are watching this, and the naturopathic healthcare providers watching this?
I would say really listen, hone your listening skills and maybe sit back and think, do I really listen, or am I assuming I know what they're going to say next because I've had experience of other women in this situation? I think that's what she's going to say. Or practice listening at home, because listening to a member of your family is really hard because you've got all that history with them that you want to fix it or suggest it or disagree with them a lot of time. So really practicing those listening skills is really important. There's a really amazing book called Listen. I can't remember the lady who wrote it, but it's just called Listen. And it was a lady who worked in palliative care. So she worked a lot with people who were dying and their families, and how she would really listen to what those people had to say to her and create space for them to really say what they really meant rather than what they thought either their family wanted them to say or what she thought they were going to say. So I'd really recommend that book, Listen, but also ask really open questions, and then don't be afraid to be quiet, whether you have a one-to-one or you have a group, to allow people to speak into that space. Because I don't think we listen enough generally in our society, full stop. But I do notice that lots of the mums I support, particularly in pregnancy, feel that they're just being rushed through the healthcare system, that no one's actually giving them the time to say how they're really feeling or what they're really worried about. So my one piece of advice would be really hone your listening skills, or maybe over the next 5 days when you're having conversations, just ask yourself, am I properly listening? Or am I thinking about what I'm going to make for tea? Or am I thinking about another thing I'm planning? Or am I already trying to think of how I'm going to respond to this person, but I'm not really listening to what they're saying to me?
Yeah, it is very tough, isn't it? Because you know, as we all know, the midwives and doctors and whatnot are often so incredibly pushed for time. And
Yeah, they are.
you know, it's like the one thing they do want to ask, but they don't dare ask is, you know, their question, is there anything else that, you know, you want to go over today? Oh, the floodgates open, right? You think, and you've got other people sitting in the waiting room, and you're like, I can't sit here for another 10 minutes talking to you. I'm already 10 minutes behind.
Yeah.
And that kind of pressure is, you know, I love the old you know, Ask the Midwife UK program. I think a lot of people love that, but there was it was a different era where you could
Yeah.
see that the midwives could actually spend time and
Yeah.
actually talk to their clients. And I would have to say, of all the programs that I've ever seen of babies being born, of actors acting babies being born, it's the one program that is can be very realistic, because they've
Yeah.
got midwives on set guiding, and it's I
Yeah.
admire that. Um, but it almost is a reminder of how things were. Um, and you know, you can sit there as a midwife and go, gee, you know, we just can't do that anymore. We've got all
Yeah.
these other bells and whistles and things, but that's that's a hard thing. So women are not, um, you know, so sometimes there's that reliance on a doula, which is great for general um, information, but then again, often the questions and queries and worries are around things that are obstetric or medical.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, that's where you kind of need that ability to just plonk somebody, a midwife, into the group or something, and let them just
Yeah.
answer everybody's questions for hours and hours on end. And yeah, it does um, sadden me when, with some of the questions that I receive in with things like the Ask the Maternity Forum and other places like that, where we volunteer on it, where sometimes they are just the most incredibly simple, basic questions that are really worrying the woman. And you just go, God, you know, if nobody's answered that for you, there's all this
Yeah.
other stuff you should know. This is like really, so this is like, you know, 101 stuff, and we want to get you to where you know, all of it. And it's scary. I would have to say I see that worse in America.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Philippines. Actually, those would be the two
Mm.
standout locations where it's very evident that women are going through their pregnancies with not a lot of guidance
Yeah.
and a
And I
lot of
think also
questions.
we often have a fear of medical professionals, or a respect for them, that we just take what they say it as the truth.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then when you so mum will say, oh well, my midwife said this or my consultant said this, and then when she brings it to the circle, the normal question will be, well, my midwife said that, is that right, is that normal? And then you'll get other will say, well, that's not what my midwife has said, or well, that didn't happen when I had my first baby. And then they'll say, well, Mandy, what's your experience? I say, well, I will do, I'm not a medic, but the moms that I've worked with, I haven't heard that happen before. And they're like, well, I'm really uncomfortable with it, so I'm going to query it. Whereas if she hadn't had that space, she would have just gone along with it, because you get the impression that that's just how it works. That the
Yeah,
classic thing that
well
comes up
said.
all the time are, the in sweeps and internal examinations. There's just that assumption that you have to have them, because you're led to believe it's like, well, we'll book you in for a sweep on this day and then your next one on that day. And then when you say to them, you don't have to have a sweep there, you get to choose. The number of us say, oh, I thought that I had to have it because my midwife's already booked me in for my sweep and I'm only 24 weeks pregnant. And it's just that understanding that no, you do have a lot of choice around what happens to you when you're having a baby. It shouldn't feel like a factory system, but for many reasons, it unfortunately is getting to be much more like that conveyor belt factory system. Let's just get mums in and out as quickly as we can to have their babies, because again, the system's just under so much pressure. And that's not a criticism of the midwives, because they're doing a really great job under difficult circumstances. It's just the system is just not working, which I think we are having to bridge that gap. We are having to fill the hole. We're having to create the time to answer those questions, because the maternity services don't have the time to do it.
And do you mind answering, up to you what level of detail, but how have you, because we are, most of the audience here are health professionals, how, if you don't mind explaining, how have you kind of monetized it so that it's affordable for the woman, but, it's not a service that you're out giving away your time? So how have you, because you said that you noticed that women do find, that often down the track they go, no, this with my second or third, I'm going to invest in me, so how do you work that with your circles?
So I do mine in blocks. So my pregnancy circle, I mean, I'm very happy to be very open about what I charge. I do 8-week blocks. Each class is 2 hours, and they pay £140 for those 8 weeks. And I have 10, 11 women in each group. So that works out, and they're paying what, 17, £18 per times 10.
Yeah.
So I get 170, 180 for that 2-hour session. And then with my mum and baby group, that works in 6-week blocks, because it tends to run like school half terms. And I charge £110 for that block. And I have around 10, 11 mums and babies in that group. So it's more.
The prenatal one is do you sort of market it as being prenatal education, or are you anticipating that they're also doing their kind of regular prenatal education and this is additional? How are you?
I package it as birth preparation. I took back it as because I incorporate some yoga in mine. So I say I call it my birth preparation and pregnancy yoga circle, but I market it very much as a wellbeing space for you. I don't assume that my mums are going to any other support. I would say it's 50-50. Just 50%. I'm the only antenatal group they're going to. But sometimes you get a mum who's also doing like an NCT class here, or she's also doing hypnobirthing. She might also have got one mum who sadly lost a baby in her very late on in her first pregnancy. So this is her next pregnancy. She's doing hypnobirthing migrate, and she does have an independent midwife supporting her as well, because she's realized she needs that extra support. But around about 50%, if not more, of my mums, I'm the only antenatal group that they come to. So I very much caveat it that, I'm not a midwife, I'm not a doctor, but this is my experience. Or if they ask a question and I simply do not know, I'll just say, I've had no idea, but I can check with you. So I have doula friends and midwife friends and physio friends that I can ask questions of. So I'll always signpost people, because just honesty is the best policy. If I don't know, I don't know. and they don't expect me to know either, but I very much say that it's birth preparation and holistic. That then my postnatal group, it's very much, this is for you, mum. This is not for your baby. Your baby comes and your baby will benefit massively, but this is for you, because I want you to realize how important you are, and I want you to spend money on yourself, which is the more difficult marketing message. But it does work. I'm very lucky. My postnatal groups are always full as well.
Wow. Look, what you're
So,
doing is absolutely changing lives, and you know it is.
mhm.
And it's so. And when we think of the amount of money that gets spent in so many other areas, it's such a little tiny drip in the bucket, but
Yeah.
it makes this profound change, and often, we don't even think about accumulating thousands and thousands in debt of academic studies as part of career, and yet we'll question spending a few hundred on something that's going to have this huge impact. Yeah, and so look, what you're doing is so incredibly important, Mandy, and we just want to thank you, and thank you for sharing your experience here. You're certainly talking to the converted.
Yeah, that's easy.
That's
That's
for sure.
easy.
But it's great to just have your insights on your experiences, because it helps everybody to just glean a few more ideas, and maybe remind us all of just how important it is to not get too lost in the weeds of just every day, and running the show of your business. What you do changes lives, and we have to remember that. And
Thank you. So I do
yeah,
I do teach women to do this as well. So I have a Mother Circle school where I teach people how to run their own Mother Circle. So if anyone, I've been doing this for a long time, just wants to ask me a question, or just that, I do this, but I find this bit difficult, and they want my thoughts on it, then they're very welcome to get in touch. My email is mandy@motherforlife.co.uk. I'm really happy to just answer any questions anyone has, because it does change lives. I see it all the time.
yeah.
They are such special spaces.
And do just repeat that email again.
So it's Mandy, MANDY, then at mother4life.co.uk.
Fantastic.
If you Google motherforlife.co.uk, you'll get to my website, and then you can just find me on the contact
Oh,
me page.
brilliant. Look, thank you so much. And I appreciate you bearing with some questionable internet connection stability. At the beginning, I don't know what was going on, but it
We
came
got there.
right in the end. And thank you for winging it there. And thank you for those that joined us live today. It's always great to have some of you live, and I know that a lot of you will be watching this later on. And thank you for taking the time, Mandy, to just share what you do with the IMCO community. Everybody here is got integrative and holistic maternity health care as a priority within how they run their operation, and it's all about sharing the information, and that's just fun. So thank you so much. And
No, it's a pleasure. I'm really happy to be here. It's been nice to meet you as well, and I hope my winging it at the beginning was okay.
it was awesome. No, you were fantastic. Thank you so much. I was
Thank you
sitting
very
here
much.
feeling powerless, going, I was thinking, I'm pretty sure that she's got some fairly good experience on Zoom, so we might be right.
Brilliant.
So
Thanks ever so much,
awesome.
Kathy. It's lovely to talk to you, and thank you for everyone who's watching.
Okay, thank you,
Take
everybody,
care.
and
Thank
wish
you.
everybody a wonderful rest of the week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.